For centuries, the galactic empires have expanded, conquering world after world, absorbing species into their vast domains. But there is a hard boundary, an invisible wall where every map simply stops: human space. No one dares to venture beyond. No one asks why. The greatest minds of the galaxy whisper about it, but fear keeps them silent. The Cathari, a proud and ancient race, had mapped thousands of star systems, their empire stretching further than any other. Yet, when they reached the human territories, their grand explorers simply stopped. They didn't return. No distress signals, no final messages, no wreckage. Just silence. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the most powerful species in the known universe, had long debated the human question. They were an oddity, a species that had clawed its way to the stars through war, bloodshed, and sheer reckless determination. Unlike other civilizations that grew through diplomacy or slow advancement, humans expanded like fire, violent, unpredictable, unstoppable. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they stopped. Their ships no longer explored. Their colonies did not spread beyond a specific border. No wars, no treaties, no further expansion. They had drawn a line in the void, and no one dared cross it. But someone had to ask. Ambassador Koran Vesh of the Zixari Dominion had spent his life studying the humans. They were fascinating, fragile yet terrifying, weak yet impossible to subdue. He had read the reports, listened to the stories, and felt the unease that ran through the council whenever the topic of Earth was brought up. And now he had his chance. A human delegation had extended an invitation, the first in over a century. A single ship was allowed to enter their space, to meet them on one of their core worlds. It was an honor, an opportunity, and a warning. Koran knew the risks. Everyone did. No one who crossed into human space had ever returned, but the question burned inside him. He had to know why. So, he accepted. As his ship crossed the invisible boundary, silence fell over his crew. The stars beyond seemed darker, the space itself heavier. Instruments flickered, detecting something wrong. The vast emptiness that had once seemed predictable was now unknowable. And then, the humans sent a message. "Welcome to our space, Ambassador Vesh. We hope you enjoy your stay." Their voices were calm. Too calm. Koran had spent his entire life believing the universe followed a set of rules, but deep down, he knew. The humans had found something out here, something no one else had. And whatever it was, they had made sure that no one else would ever find it. The human escort ship guided Koran's vessel through the void, deeper into the unknown. Unlike the grand warships of the Galactic Council, this human craft was sleek, unassuming, yet something about it unsettled him. It moved with eerie precision, as if it were alive. Every movement was too smooth, too controlled. Koran had seen ships of war, transports, and diplomatic cruisers before, but this was something else, something different. His crew remained silent, watching the dark expanse through the viewing panels. A feeling of unease gripped them all. The ship's sensors still flickered with uncertainty, unable to fully register what lay beyond. It was as if the very fabric of space was distorted here, unreadable. Then, the human voice returned. "We are approaching Sol. Prepare for descent." The words were spoken in perfect standard galactic, yet they felt cold, artificial. Koran had met humans before, traders and diplomats who carried themselves with an almost arrogant confidence. But this was different. The screen flickered, and for the first time, Koran saw Earth. It was unlike any homeworld he had seen before. Other species cherished their planets, preserving nature in balance with their cities. But Earth was a paradox. Towering megastructures stretched beyond the clouds, yet vast stretches of untouched wilderness remained, as if the humans refused to let go of their past. The planet was alive, not just with civilization, but with something deeper, something ancient. Their ship entered the atmosphere, and Corin felt it immediately. A presence, a weight pressing against his mind. It wasn't a physical force, but something beyond his understanding. He glanced at his crew, and they felt it too. "Something is wrong," one of them whispered. The ship descended to a landing platform, and the doors opened. A group of humans waited outside, their expressions unreadable. Unlike other races that adorned themselves with medals and extravagant robes, these humans wore simple, practical uniforms. Their leader, a woman with piercing gray eyes, stepped forward. "Ambassador Vesh," she said. "Welcome to Earth." Corin studied her, searching for some sign of deception, some clue to the mystery that had kept the galaxy at bay. He saw nothing. No fear, no arrogance, just certainty. They knew something. Something the rest of the universe wasn't meant to know. And he was about to find out why. Corin stepped onto the landing platform, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer presence of Earth. The air was thick, rich with unfamiliar scents. Strange flora, the unmistakable tang of industrial metals, and something else. Something he couldn't place. The human leader studied him with unwavering eyes, her expression unreadable. "I am Director Helena Graves," she said. "You must be tired from your journey." Her voice was calm, polite, yet it carried an underlying finality. Not a threat, not an invitation, just a statement of fact. "My crew," Corin started, but Helena raised a hand. "They will be accommodated," she said, "but your presence was requested alone." Corin stiffened. This was unusual. Every diplomatic meeting he had attended involved an entourage, guards, aides, advisors. But humans had a way of rewriting the rules. He glanced back at his crew. Their unease was palpable, but there was nothing they could do. He gave a slow nod, signaling them to comply. The doors of their vessel shut behind them, and he was alone. Helena gestured toward a waiting transport, a sleek, black vehicle with no visible markings. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The ride was silent. No unnecessary conversation. No scenery to distract him. The windows were dark, blocking any view of the world outside. Corin forced himself to remain calm. He had dealt with powerful figures before. He had stood before warlords and emperors. Yet, somehow, sitting beside this human woman in this unmarked transport, he felt something new. Not fear. Dread. After what felt like an eternity, the vehicle stopped. The doors opened, revealing a vast underground structure. The architecture was unsettling. Smooth, seamless, and impossibly precise. It was not the crude industrialism he had expected from humans. No visible seams, no unnecessary ornamentation. Just pure, functional design. "Follow me," Helena said. She led him through a series of hallways, deeper into the facility. The walls were lined with massive doors, each marked only by a series of numbers. No symbols, no explanations. The air grew colder. Finally, they reached a door unlike the others. It was larger, thicker. It hummed with a power Corin could feel in his bones. Helena placed her hand against a panel, and the door slid open. Inside, the room was dark. A single massive window overlooked something below, shrouded in shadows. Corin stepped closer, peering through the glass. Then the lights flickered on. And he saw it. His breath caught in his throat. His mind recoiled, struggling to comprehend what lay beneath. It was alive. It was enormous. and it was waiting. Corin turned to Helena, his voice barely a whisper. "What is that?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "That," she said, "is why no one crosses into human space." Corin's breath came in short, shallow bursts. His twin hearts pounded against his ribs as he stared through the reinforced glass, struggling to process what he was seeing. The chamber below stretched impossibly far into the darkness, its depths illuminated only by the cold glow of hidden lights embedded in the walls. And at the very center of it all was something. The creature, if it could even be called that, was vast beyond comprehension, its form shifting and undulating as if it were not entirely bound by the rules of this universe. It had no defined shape, no clear anatomy, yet his mind insisted on trying to impose logic onto it. One moment, it seemed like an amorphous mass of writhing tendrils. The next, it hinted at something vaguely humanoid, its elongated limbs twitching in slow, deliberate motions. But the worst part, the part that made his stomach churn, was the feeling of awareness. It was looking at him. Not with eyes. There were no eyes, but Corin could feel its attention settle on him, seeping into his very being like an oil slick spreading through water. His instincts screamed at him to run, to flee, to put as much distance as possible between himself and the entity imprisoned below. But his body wouldn't move. What is that?" he managed to rasp, forcing the words past dry lips. Helena Graves stood beside him, arms folded behind her back, her expression unreadable. She watched Corin, studying his reaction more than the thing below. "This is what we found," she said quietly. Or more accurately, what found us? Corin tore his gaze away from the creature and turned to her, desperate for an explanation. "You captured it?" he demanded. How?" Helena let out a slow breath. "No, Ambassador, we didn't capture it. We contained it." Corin's mind reeled. Containment was a dangerous word. It implied something too dangerous to be let loose, something powerful enough to require constant vigilance. He had encountered species that dabbled in such things, creatures from the fringes of the known universe that needed entire planets to serve as prisons. But this was different. This wasn't a being they had found on some distant world. This was something humans had encountered within their own space, and they had locked it away. His fingers curled against the railing as he tried to keep his voice steady. "Where did it come from?" Helena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned back toward the glass, watching the entity below. Its shifting form pulsed, reacting to their presence. "We don't know," she admitted. "We only know that they exist, and that we are not meant to see them." A chill ran down Corin's spine. "They." He swallowed hard. "How many?" Helena finally looked at him, her gray eyes sharp, unwavering. "Too many." Silence filled the observation deck. Corin's mind raced with possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. He had always believed that space, for all its mysteries, followed certain rules, that civilizations rose and fell, that empires clashed, that wars were fought and treaties were signed. But this was something else. Something older, something deeper, something that was never supposed to be known. "And this," Corin whispered, barely able to form the words, "is why no one crosses into human space?" Helena nodded. "The other empires assume we stopped expanding out of caution, that we reached the limits of our ambition." She turned back toward the creature, her face expressionless. "But the truth is, we went too far. We saw too much, and we learned the one thing no other species in the galaxy seems to understand." Corin could barely breathe. "And what is that?" Helena's voice was calm, almost too calm. "That we were never alone, Corin felt the weight of those words settle over him like a suffocating blanket. His people, the Zixari, had always prided themselves on their knowledge, their vast archives of star charts and ancient histories. They had mapped thousands of systems, encountered hundreds of species, waged wars, and brokered peace. Yet in all their records, in all their explorations, they had never encountered anything like this. "You should leave," Helena said, her voice softer now. Corin's gaze snapped to her. "What?" She turned fully to face him, her expression unreadable. "We granted you this meeting because we knew you would ask," she said. "We knew that eventually someone in the council would push too far, that curiosity would get the better of one of you." Corin felt a sharp chill settle in his gut. "You're warning me." Helena gave a small nod. "We don't stop others from crossing into human space because of secrecy or power," she said. "We do it because we're containing something, and if the rest of the galaxy starts poking around where it shouldn't, we can't guarantee that containment will hold." The meaning of her words sank into him like ice. The humans weren't isolationists. They weren't hoarding secrets for themselves. They were standing at the edge of something terrible, holding the line. And if that line broke... Corin felt his hands shaking. He wanted to argue, to demand answers, to insist that the Galactic Council had a right to know the full truth. But deep in his soul, he understood. Some truths were better left buried. Some doors were never meant to be opened. And the humans, reckless and terrifying as they were, had learned that lesson the hard way. Corin exhaled slowly and stepped away from the glass. "Take me back to my ship." Helena nodded once. No argument, no further discussion, just quiet understanding. As they walked away from the observation deck, Corin forced himself not to look back, not to glance one last time at the shifting, impossible thing in the chamber below. But as the doors slid shut behind him, he heard it. A whisper, a voice not meant for mortal ears. "We see you." Corin did not speak for the rest of the journey, because for the first time in his life, he truly understood fear. The journey back to his ship was suffocating. Corin sat in silence, his mind spinning with the weight of what he had just witnessed. The transport moved with the same eerie precision, gliding through the underground corridors without a single jolt or hesitation. Every second that passed, the whisper echoed in his mind. "We see you." The words had no source, no mouth to speak them, and yet he had heard them as clearly as if they had been spoken into his ear. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. He was a diplomat, an ambassador. He had dealt with the most cunning, manipulative beings in the galaxy. He had stood before warlords, debated with rulers who held the fates of entire worlds in their hands. And yet, nothing had prepared him for this. Across from him, Helena Graves sat with her usual composure, arms folded, gaze fixed ahead. She had not spoken since they left the chamber. She didn't need to. Finally, Corin found his voice. It was quieter than he intended. "You've known about them for a long time." Helena nodded. "Longer than you'd believe." Corin exhaled sharply. "And you've kept it from the rest of the galaxy, all this time." A small, humorless smile flickered across her lips. "Would you have done any different?" He wanted to say yes. He wanted to insist that the Galactic Council had a right to know, that every species in the universe should be united against a threat of this magnitude. But the words died before they could leave his mouth. He wouldn't have done any different, because this wasn't a war. This wasn't an enemy that could be fought with fleets and weapons. It was something else, something older, something beyond the comprehension of any species that still believed itself in control of the universe. "How many have seen it?" he asked. Helena's expression darkened. "Few. Fewer still who leave with their sanity intact." A shiver ran down his spine. "You will return to your people," she continued. "You will tell them that humanity refuses to open its borders, that we will not negotiate our stance, and if they push further—" She turned her head, meeting his gaze. For the first time, Corin saw something in her eyes. Not fear, resolve. "If they push further," she said, "we won't stop them, but we won't be responsible for what happens next." A heavy silence settled between them. Corin let out a slow breath, his mind working through the implications. If he told the council the truth, they would demand evidence. They would send scouts, then research teams, then warships. They would probe the depths of human space, believing themselves prepared for what they might find. But they weren't prepared. Not for this. The transport came to a halt. The doors slid open, revealing the landing platform. His ship sat where he had left it, his crew waiting anxiously at the base of the ramp. They stiffened as he stepped out, their eyes flickering between him and the human escorts. He turned to Helena one last time. "You're not telling me everything." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "No," she admitted. "I'm not." He considered pressing further, demanding to know the rest, but in the end, he didn't. Some knowledge wasn't meant to be gained. Without another word, he strode toward his ship. His crew followed him without question, sensing the weight of his silence. The doors sealed behind them, and Coran moved straight to the command deck. "Prepare for immediate departure," he ordered. The ship's engines roared to life. As they ascended, leaving Earth behind, Coran took one final glance at the blue planet shrinking below them. It was not an empire. Not a war-hungry dominion seeking to expand its reach. It was a wall, a thin, fragile wall between the known universe and something no one should ever see. And for the first time, Corin prayed it would hold. Because if it didn't, nothing would. As the ship broke free from Earth's gravity, Corin remained at the viewport, watching as the blue planet faded into the darkness of space. His twin hearts still thundered in his chest, his mind racing through everything he had witnessed. His crew remained silent behind him, sensing the weight in his stance, the stiffness in his posture. The view of Earth should have been comforting, just another inhabited world, one of many across the stars. But now it felt different. It was a prison. And for the first time in his life, Corin feared what lay inside. "Ambassador?" The voice of his second-in-command, Commander Velek, cut through the silence. "Are we clear to depart?" Corin nodded, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Set course for the council station. No delays." Velek hesitated. No delays? He cast a quick glance at the planet behind them. "Are we not filing a report with the humans before departure?" "No," Corin said quickly. "We leave now." There was a pause, and then Velek gave a small nod before turning to relay the orders. The crew, though confused, complied without question. The hum of the ship's engines intensified as they powered up for faster-than-light travel. Corin took his seat at the command console, his hands gripping the armrests tighter than necessary. His mind kept replaying the final words Helena Graves had spoken to him. "We won't stop them, but we won't be responsible for what happens next." It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. The ship lurched forward, stars streaking past the viewport as they accelerated into the void. Yet, no matter how far they traveled, Coran could still feel it. The weight of unseen eyes. The journey back to the Galactic Council Station was uneventful, but Coran found no relief in that. Every moment of silence, every stretch of empty space felt heavier than before. He spent hours reviewing his diplomatic notes, rewriting his report over and over again, trying to decide how much to tell the Council. And more importantly, how much to leave out. When they finally arrived, the station loomed ahead, a massive structure floating on the edge of neutral space, its design a blend of a dozen different species. It was a place of politics, of negotiations, of measured words and calculated alliances. It felt small now. As his ship docked, Corin straightened his uniform, drawing a deep breath. He needed to be careful. One wrong sentence, one misplaced warning, and the Council would push for deeper investigation. And that could not happen. The airlock hissed open, and he was greeted by an escort of officials. They were waiting for him. Word had already spread that he had met with the humans. A formal meeting was scheduled within the hour. Corin didn't have time to prepare further. As he was led through the pristine halls of the council chambers, he kept his expression unreadable, his mind carefully constructing his words. When the great doors to the assembly opened, dozens of representatives from across the galaxy turned to face him, waiting to hear his report. He took his place at the center of the room, standing tall despite the weight pressing on his shoulders. "The negotiations with humanity have concluded," Corin began, his voice steady, "and their stance remains unchanged. They will not expand. They will not open their borders, and they will not discuss the reasons behind their isolation." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. He could already see the dissatisfaction among the more aggressive factions. They would want to press further. They would demand answers. Corin inhaled slowly. Now was the moment of decision. Tell the truth, and risk everything. Or lie, and pray the galaxy never learned what lurked beyond the edge of human space. He exhaled, his voice calm, practiced, controlled. Humanity has chosen their path, and I strongly advise the Council to respect it. Silence. Then the voices rose. Some agreed, others protested. Questions were thrown at him from every direction, but Corin stood firm, his expression unreadable. Because there was one truth he knew for certain. Some secrets should never be uncovered, and some warnings should always be heeded, even when they came from the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The council chambers erupted in a chaotic wave of murmurs and debates, the voices of dozens of species rising in frustration. Corin remained still, letting the noise wash over him. He had expected this reaction. The Galactic Council had spent centuries expanding, learning, and cataloging every corner of the known universe. The idea that a species, a younger species no less, could block them from further exploration was an insult to their collective authority. A voice cut through the noise. "Ambassador Corin." He turned his head toward the source. High Chancellor Virak of the Kevar Dominion, a towering figure of scaled green skin and piercing golden eyes, stood from his seat. Unlike the others, his voice carried no frustration, only cold calculation. "You expect us to accept this answer?" Virak asked, his gaze locked onto Corin like a predator studying its prey. "To simply respect their refusal?" Corin kept his expression neutral. "Yes." A ripple of dissatisfaction spread through the chamber. Virak's lips curled in something resembling a smile. "And why exactly should we do that?" He leaned forward slightly. "You're asking the Council to abandon a region of space simply because the humans said so. You must understand how weak that sounds." Corin's fingers twitched at his sides. "It is not weakness," he said carefully. "It is wisdom." Virak's eyes narrowed. "Then share this wisdom with us." The chamber quieted, all eyes on Corin. He felt his twin hearts pound against his ribs. He had expected this challenge, but he still had no perfect answer. Tell them the full truth, and they would demand proof. And proof would mean expeditions. Expeditions would mean ships entering human space. And then the thing that had whispered to him would know. It would see them. Corin forced himself to breathe slowly. "The humans have been within their borders for centuries," he said. "They do not seek conquest, nor do they interfere with the affairs of others. If they wished for war, they would have waged it already. If they wished for allies, they would have sought them out. Instead, they remain contained within their space, not because of us, but because of something they will not name." He let the weight of his words settle before continuing. "And if a species as unyielding as humanity refuses to move forward, perhaps we should ask why before demanding they step aside." Virak's golden eyes gleamed. "Or perhaps," he countered, "they have discovered something valuable within their territory and wish to keep it for themselves." Corin's jaw tightened. This was dangerous. The Kavar Dominion was one of the most ambitious members of the Council. They did not see obstacles. They saw challenges. If Virak believed humanity was hiding something of worth, he would push for forceful intervention. "The humans did not issue threats," Corin said, keeping his voice even. "They did not posture, nor did they attempt to deceive me. They made one thing clear." He looked directly at Virak. "If we enter their space, they will not protect us. They will not take responsibility for what happens to those who ignore their warnings." A murmur of unease spread through the chamber. Some of the representatives glanced at each other, their confidence wavering. But Virak remained unimpressed. "And you believe them?" Corin met his gaze without flinching. "Yes." Virak studied him for a long moment. Then, with a slight scoff, he sat back in his seat. "Your caution is noted, Ambassador." But Corin knew this wasn't over. Virak wasn't convinced, and neither were others. As the debate continued, Corin's stomach twisted with unease. He had done what he could, but it wouldn't be enough. There were too many voices in this room who saw mystery as an invitation rather than a warning. They would send ships. They would try to map what lay beyond the human borders. And when they did, something would look back at them. Corin clenched his hands, a cold dread sinking deep into his bones. He only prayed that when the council finally understood the truth, it wouldn't be too late. The council meeting dragged on for hours, filled with debates, counter-arguments, and bureaucratic posturing. Some representatives argued that humanity's secrecy warranted investigation. Others, more cautious, suggested patience and diplomacy. But Corin knew the truth. The council was not an institution known for patience. By the time the session ended, nothing had been decided outright. But he saw it in their eyes. The gears were already turning. The powerful factions, especially the Kavar Dominion, would not let this mystery go. As Corin left the chamber, his second-in-command, Velek, fell into step beside him. "They're going to send ships," Corin sighed. "I know. They won't listen to the warning." "I know." They walked in silence for a while, their footsteps echoing in the grand halls of the station. Outside the great windows, the vastness of space stretched endlessly, filled with the lights of arriving and departing ships. Corin wondered how many of them would make it back once they crossed the wrong border. Velek hesitated before speaking again. "What exactly did you see on Earth?" Corin stopped walking. His mind flashed back to the moment in that underground chamber, the whisper, the suffocating presence, the way reality itself seemed to bend around whatever it was that the humans had hidden. How could he put it into words? He turned to Velek, his expression grim. "I saw something I don't understand." He paused. "And I don't want to understand it." For the first time, Velek looked uneasy. "That bad?" Corin exhaled slowly. "Worse." They resumed walking, but Corin could tell his second-in-command was shaken. Good. A little fear was better than reckless curiosity. When they reached their ship, Corin wasted no time preparing for departure. He didn't want to linger on the station. He had done what he could. Now, he could only wait. As the ship disengaged from the station and set a course for neutral space, Corin allowed himself a brief moment of relief. He had delivered the warning. The rest was out of his hands. Or so he thought. 3 weeks later, the distress call came. Corin was in his quarters when the alert flashed across his screen. His heart pounded as he read the report. A Kevar scouting vessel had gone missing. In human space. More reports followed in quick succession. Ships sent to investigate had also vanished. No wreckage, no distress beacons, no survivors. Just silence. The Council was in chaos. The Kevar Dominion was demanding answers. The humans gave none. They simply repeated the same message. Do not come here. Do not send more ships. We will not help you. Corin felt a deep chill settle in his bones. This was it. The thing he had feared. Someone had ignored the warning. And now, something was awake. The Council convened an emergency session. Tensions were high. The representatives divided. Some demanded retaliation against humanity for their refusal to cooperate. Others urged caution, fearing an unseen threat. High Chancellor Virac was livid. "We have lost our people," he roared, slamming a clawed fist onto the table, "and the humans refuse to answer for it." Corin sat silently, listening. His mind was racing, piecing things together. He knew, deep down, that the humans weren't responsible for the missing ships. Something else had taken them. A deep dread filled him as he recalled Helena Graves' words. "We won't stop them, but we won't be responsible for what happens next." This was exactly what she had meant. Corin stood. "Chancellor," he said, addressing Virac, "you believe humanity is withholding information. That may be true, but I urge you to consider. What if this is not their doing?" Virac's eyes burned with anger. "Then who else could be responsible?" Corin hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "You assume we are the only ones looking?" He let the implication settle. What if something was looking back? The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. The thought was too terrible to consider. Virac sneered. "If there is a threat, we must uncover it. We cannot let humanity dictate the limits of our knowledge." Corin clenched his fists. This was exactly the kind of thinking that would doom them all. But before he could argue further, the emergency alarms blared. A new transmission had arrived. From the missing Kevar vessel. And what it contained was worse than anything Corin could have imagined. The chamber fell into a stunned silence as the emergency transmission played across the central holoscreen. The image was grainy, flickering with static, but the voice that came through was unmistakably Kevar. "This is Scout Vessel Vorash. We are lost." The voice was trembling. Corin had never heard a Kevar sound afraid before. They were a warrior species, bred for battle, their culture built on strength and dominance. But this was terror. "They are here," the voice continued, barely a whisper now. Not human. They are watching. We were wrong. We were—" A sudden burst of static cut off the voice. Then something else came through. Not a scream, not a cry for help, a sound, a low, distorted whisper layered over itself 1,000 times, as if a chorus of unseen mouths were speaking in unison. It wasn't in any known language. It was something deeper, something primal, and every single person in the chamber felt it. Some clutched at their chests as if the sound alone was pressing against their lungs. Others shuddered as a deep, cold dread crawled down their spines. Then suddenly, silence. The transmission cut out. The chamber remained frozen in horror. No one spoke. No one moved. Until Virac stood. "Where did that signal come from?" His voice was sharp, but there was an edge to it, something he was trying to suppress. A technician hesitated before responding. It originated from the far edge of human space. Virak's jaw tightened. Then we send a fleet. Corin's stomach dropped. You can't be serious. Virak turned to him, eyes burning. We have lost ships. We have lost people. You expect us to sit idly by while— That thing in the transmission, Corin interrupted, was not Kever. It was not human. It was something else. Virak scoffed. And what do you suggest? That we leave our missing to whatever horror lurks out there? Corin's mind raced. There had to be another way. Send a diplomatic envoy. Speak with the humans. They know what's out there. If we push into their space without understanding— Virak slammed a fist onto the table. Understanding is for cowards. Action is what we need now. Corin clenched his fists. If you send ships into human space, you won't just be dealing with the humans. His voice lowered. You'll be dealing with whatever they are hiding from. For the first time, Virak hesitated. Not because he was convinced, but because the fear in the room was palpable. The transmission had shaken the council. They all felt something unnatural in that whisper, something beyond their comprehension. But warriors like Virak did not yield to fear. They fought against it, and Coran knew deep down that no argument would stop him now. Virak turned away. We mobilize a fleet. The fleet arrived at the edge of human space 2 standard weeks later. Corin had not been invited. He had not been consulted. He had only received a brief, cold message from Virak. Stay out of the way. And so he did. He stayed in his own vessel, stationed at a distance, monitoring the situation from afar, watching, waiting. At first, nothing happened. The Kaver fleet sent out long-range scans. They found nothing. No wreckage, no human defenses mobilizing, just empty space. And then the whispers began. Not over comms, not over any known frequency, inside their minds. It started as an itch in the back of their thoughts, a quiet presence, a feeling of being observed. Then the voices grew louder. One by one, crew members began reporting hearing something, a whisper just beyond the edge of comprehension. And then the shadows came. They weren't ships, they weren't life forms, they weren't anything the Kavar had words for. They were just there, watching, waiting. One Kavar vessel opened fire, and that was when the screaming began. It didn't come from comms. It came from the ships themselves, metal twisted, hulls bent, as if unseen hands were crushing them from the inside out. Some ships tried to escape, only to vanish mid-flight, winking out of existence without a trace. The flagship tried to transmit a distress signal. The last words the fleet sent back to the council were, "We were wrong." Then, silence. The entire fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not obliterated in battle, simply erased, as if they had never been there at all. 3 days later, Corin sat alone in his quarters, staring blankly at the void outside his viewport. He had known this would happen. He had tried to stop it. And yet even he had not expected the sheer, unfathomable finality of it. The Kavar Dominion was in chaos. The council was shaken to its core. Even Virak, the arrogant, unshakable warrior, had disappeared, lost to whatever force had claimed his fleet. Humanity remained silent. No threats, no warnings, no reaction at all. As if this outcome had been inevitable. As if this was not the first time it had happened. A private message appeared on Corin's screen. From an anonymous sender, a single line of text. "We told you not to look." Corin closed his eyes. Somewhere, out in the darkness, something was awake now, and it knew they had seen it. The message sat on Coran's screen, its meaning sinking deep into his thoughts like a stone in a vast black ocean. "We told you not to look, not a threat, not a warning, just a statement of fact." His hands clenched into fists. The Kaver fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not crippled, just erased, as if they had never existed in the first place. And humanity? They didn't celebrate. They didn't retaliate. They simply watched, unbothered, as if this had all played out before. Corin exhaled slowly. He had one choice now, one chance to do what no one else had the sense to do. He had to talk to the humans. The journey to Earth was uneventful. No human ships intercepted him. No warnings blared through his comms. But that was what unsettled him most. They knew he was coming, and they weren't stopping him. That meant one of two things. Either they didn't see him as a threat, or they didn't see anyone as a threat anymore. The surface of Earth was as unassuming as ever. Bright blue oceans, vast continents teeming with life, cities stretching into the sky, filled with technology that was dangerously behind what some other species had developed. Yet here humanity was, untouched, unchallenged, unafraid. Helena Graves was waiting for him. She stood on a quiet observation deck overlooking a sprawling city, hands folded behind her back, a faint smirk on her face. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Corin stopped a few paces away from her. "You knew this would happen." Helena tilted her head slightly. "We warned you." Corin's hands twitched. "You let them die." Her smirk faded. "No." She turned to face him fully. "We let them make their own choice." Corin growled in frustration. "And what is this thing? The one that took them? What did they wake up?" Helena studied him, as if deciding how much to say. Then she sighed. "It's not a thing, Corin." He froze. Something in her voice made his skin crawl. "It's not a species, not a force, not even a god." She looked out over the city again. "It's the space between things." Corin's pulse pounded in his ears. "I don't understand." "You don't need to." Helena's gaze was distant now, her voice quieter. "We learned a long time ago that some questions shouldn't be asked, some doors shouldn't be opened. But every species that rises, that builds, that hungers for more, they all make the same mistake. They think the void is empty." She turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "But the void isn't empty, Corin. It's just silent. Until someone makes the wrong kind of noise." His breath caught in his throat. The Kaver fleet hadn't been destroyed. They had been heard, and whatever had heard them had reached back. Corin shook his head. That doesn't make sense. How could you know all this?" Helena smiled, but it was a sad, tired kind of smile. "Because we were the first ones to look." The realization struck him like a physical blow. Humanity had already made this mistake, long ago, and they had survived. Corin stepped back, his mind racing. "You're keeping it contained?" "As much as we can." "But for how long?" Helena exhaled. "For as long as we don't repeat the mistakes of others." Corin looked past her, at the vast, thriving planet of Earth, a species that had stopped expanding, that had stopped reaching too far, that knew better than to challenge the unknown. And now he understood why the galactic map ended at human space. Not because humans were a threat, but because humans knew where the real threat lay, and the rest of the galaxy was too arrogant to listen. Corin turned, his stomach churning with unease. "What happens next?" Helena's voice was steady. "That depends." "On what?" She met his gaze, and for the first time, Corin saw something behind her eyes, something ancient, something haunted. "On whether or not the galaxy can learn to be quiet." Corin left Earth that day with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain. There was no war to fight, no enemy to defeat, just an endless, watching silence, and the knowledge that somewhere, out in the void, something was still listening.